So I found this alternate Gothic number 1D, and it just, for some reason, I just cycled through probably 100 fonts, and I found this to be a really nice sans serif font. I thought it looked nice. It's condensed, so it's kind of got a taller, more condensed. Let me go ahead and collapse this spacing here to 0. So you notice how kind of it has this tall, lengthy kind of appearance. It's not very wide. The characters are not very wide. So it tends to kind of fit into smaller, more narrow places. Condensed fonts are really good for narrow places. And this is a very narrow, this is only probably 2 inches across. So having a nice font that's tall, but not necessarily stretches across. So great, I'm gonna go ahead and play around with this. I want bar to be a little bit bigger. I love to have contrast with my type. I like to have small type paired with big type. Serifs with sans serifs, just lots of contrast. Contrast is the key to good solid design. So just kind of messing with those. I also want to have consistency with my fonts. So I'm going to also make this alternate. Doesn't mean every font has to be alternate Gothic. And this is where we can maybe have fun with South America. Or actually this would be, switch that to Africa. This is where I love to play around with maybe, so we already have a lot of sans serif, so let's do a serif font. And a very high-end, elegant serif font would be Didot. So let's check out Didot and see how that looks. Didot looks nice, but you know what? I think I need even more contrast here. What if I were to change it to italic? That's a really nice traditional look and feel to it, doesn't it? So now I'm going to play around with margins and making sure I have enough white space between all of my elements. And this is too tight here, so I'm just going to take these elements, create a little bit more margin and white space here. I'm leaving open space for that little photo that I wanted to bring in. That's going to be similar to this bird that I used. And I'll show you where I get those photos and how I go into Photoshop and get those prepared. So I'm going to do something very similar to this size. So I think I want even more space. You definitely want breathing room. I keep saying that when I do critiques of people's work. I'm like, white space is your friend, more, more, more. Of course, there's too much, but so now I want to also make sure I have enough margin here on the top. So I'm just going to slide this down ever so slightly. So now we're starting to see our design kind of being blocked out. So now we have this other adhesive sticker I'd like to have at the bottom. So I'm just going to create kind of a white box to represent what that sticker would be. And when we get this ready for print, we'll have to put this on a separate element, have it as a separate image, so they can create the sticker out of that. But for right now, we're just creating our mock-up, so to speak. Let me change around color. I like to use kind of that charcoal color instead of a stark white. I'm just going to try to get an idea for balance. Sometimes I zoom out a lot when I look at a design to kind of get a sense of how does it look far away when the product would actually be in your hands. So this is probably kind of the view you'll see from the store shelf to get an idea of balance of elements. So I want to kind of have this at the bottom. I want to have my pattern shown somewhere, that beautiful pattern we made. So we want to have lots of room here to kind of make room to show off our pattern. So now I'm going to finesse this a little bit. I want a really interesting font. So these pair well together, but let's come up with something really chunky. So down here in my other example, I took a while to find this font, but this is Mighty Slab 1, and it just looked really beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and apply Mighty Slab 1. It's this really bold, chunky, beautiful slab serif. And I'm just zooming in, I'm just making sure I have the right alignment. I can click on both, go to align, do like a vertical align. I also want to make sure they're the same size, so that's 31 point. They're a little bit different size. I'm just going to take my eyedropper tool. And I could also do some manual adjustments, so I can go ahead and draw a bar or a box and make it a stroke. I'm just making sure they're aligned appropriately. And with this kind of font, sometimes aligning it perfectly doesn't always look aligned. There's kind of a optical illusion going on. And so what I like to do, I originally had, I think I had this, I was originally experimenting with having the percentage sign also being that chunky slab serif, but it kind of competed a lot with the numbers, and the numbers are very important. That's what I think people look at the most when they look at a chocolate bar, is what's the percentage of cocoa or cacao or however you want to say it. So that's a very important number. I didn't want this percentage to take away from it. So I decided to find, I believe, a little bit of a skinnier version to kind of pair. It's Die Dot. So what's great about that is I'm pulling a font that I'm already using, and I'm not adding a new font to the list of what I'm using. So let's go to Die Dot, and we can go in and make some little adjustments there. And I also want to bring out a similar style up here. So I'm just going to take the eyedropper tool for the dark cocoa, and I just brought out the same spacing that I have up there. And this is the alternate Gothic. So now I'm going to play around with spacing and margin. I want to make sure I have nice margins, nice white space here. This will eventually wrap around the other side. So that'll wrap around, and this will wrap around the back. So this is just giving us a good idea of the kind of the pattern and how everything's going to stretch across to the wrapper. And this will wrap around the back, so that'll be a separate design element, which we'll talk about later. So I'm going to zoom out again, kind of make sure I have the right balance, and I'm just cycling between these two. So I've already worked on this quite a bit to get the right balance on this version. And since this is a series, we want to have some consistency with spacing. So I think that's good. I can always make sure that's even. Just draw a box. This is my little cheat way to do it. Just draw a box, copy and paste. And that's pretty close. Just going to bring this, doing some small optical adjustments. So now I think I'm ready for my little picture, and then I'm ready to get my pattern loaded in. So I think what I want to do is get my pattern loaded in now. So I want to get like a little bar where I can show my pattern. And so on my other version, I kind of have a green color. I'll go ahead and show you right here. So I have that green. So when I think about Africa, this might be where I need to go and do a little bit of research with color and patterns. But I noticed a lot of warm tones, oranges, reds. So let me go ahead and see if I can't find kind of an orange. When you really, really, really need something bright and vibrant, we have a very dark color palette so far. So this will be our pop of color that we got to think about the consumer shelf. What's going to pop out? What design's going to pop out to them? It's going to be something that has a nice streak of bold color. So don't think about subtle here. Think about really grabbing the consumer's attention. So I'm going to do that with kind of a red-orange color. We can experiment a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I want to apply the pattern to here. So I'm just going to copy and paste this box. That's the pattern where we need the pattern loaded. It's going to bring it right on top. So that's the second box here. We're going to go to our pattern, or actually our color. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and apply the pattern I think will work well. And I'm just going to do a command, doing a command and a left bracket, just doing my layers, sending it back in the layering system, a little shortcut. You can send it back, do the brackets. So I kind of like the black pattern, but we can also double click our pattern. Go ahead and highlight it, but we can also change this from black to white. If we think white will look good too. We can save, done. But I kind of like it black. So I'm just going to go back, and anytime you want to edit the pattern, you just double click. And so this is where do we want our pattern to start and end? And we could play around with that by just kind of adjusting where it loads. I kind of like how it cuts off at different angles there. So that's very bold. Let me go ahead. I'm going to make this, instead of red, I'm going to make this kind of a really dark gray so it doesn't interfere with my design. Let's add a little more space and margin there. Make it some small adjustments. There we go. That makes me feel better. Having just a little bit more white space. Okay, so now I think we're ready for our little graphic we want to kind of represent Africa. And so for my other one, I have this bird that I was able to isolate. And let me show you where I found that bird.